Sundar Vedantam. There are a lot of people on the bridge, so thank you all for joining. This talk is about ethics and emerging technology. It's a long talk with a lot of material that I've been putting together for quite a while. I hope you find it interesting and useful. Since we have a lot of material to cover, and I'm also interested in timing myself to see how long it takes, I ask you to hold the questions for the end. In case if you have some simple thing like something I said is not clear on the bridge, please feel free to stop me and ask the question. But if it's a more detailed question, please hold off till the end of the talk so that we can talk in detail. But there are two video clips I'm trying to show in this talk. When you do that on the Skype call, it usually does not work well. The video itself plays, but the audio does not come through, and the video also tend to be choppy. So I've asked Praveen Pathak from my team to be on the call. When the videos come up, he'll post the YouTube links on the chat window. So people who are on the Skype call can just go click on that link and then look at that video. The video may be a little longer, but you need to look at only the first 1 minute and then return back. And if there are any questions, feel free to post them on the chat window. Praveen, who has attended this talk before, may be able to answer some of the questions quickly. Having said that, let's dive in. So this is the standard Intel legal notice. Since it's an Intel talk, we should have this in place. The agenda for the talk itself is starting from innovation. Like when we say technology and emerging technology, it could be of many different kind. Quite often, genetic editing, things of that nature also comes to mind. So I wanted to define it more narrowly as the kind of technology that we are involved in, more towards IT, computing, AI, deep learning, things of that nature, not the general world technology, mechanical engineering, or bioethics, or anything like that. Right. Even in this context, there is a lot of ethical and moral questions that come into play. So that's what this talk is about. It's not only just ethics, but it's also knowledge, society related. It also affects the economy, how the systems are going to function, who's going to make money, who's going to struggle, etc. And the solution for the issue is multifaceted. Right? It's not just one. It needs to come from different parts of the society, need to be well understood. And that's what this talk is. To start with, I wanted to set the context saying I'm not a Luddite, right? For those who may not know, Luddite is a term used to refer to someone who's not enthusiastic about technology at all. It comes from like 19th century England when textile manufacturing was getting more and more automated, and apparently people who didn't like it, who thought the jobs are all going to go away, went and smashed the machines around. And the term Luddite came from that era. Since then, it's always been used to mean anyone who doesn't like any kind of technology. And naturally, none of us are like that. We all work for Intel, so we bleed blue, right? So that's what makes our life interesting. That's what feeds us every day. So we are definitely in support of technology. And personally, I do have an Amazon Echo at home. I like the instant connectivity of the network. I've been known to donate money to electric vehicle research. I go around giving talks on 5G to people around the world. So I'm completely in technology. I can see what are all the good things it can do, right? So no questions about that. But we do need to keep our eyes wide open because it's going to have a lot of impact and effect in and around us in our own lives. And anyone knows what or who this is? Even if you're on the bridge, maybe you can shout it out once. if not, in Roman mythology, this is supposed to be God Janus, the god of beginnings, transitions, time, duality, doorways, and ending. So I was looking for some metaphor that defines what we are trying to talk about and what covers it sort of end to end, and this is what came to mind. Keep this image in your mind, and then we'll come back to see why and how it maps to what we are talking about. Right? Basically, to get the ethics right, you really need to have a comprehensive view of forward and backward to so that the society functions well. So let's dive into a real problem directly to put the issues in context. Right? You may know about this problem. If not, this is very famously called the trolley problem. It's a thought experiment. It was proposed in the 1970s. The idea is there is a trolley track. There is a trolley on the track that is unmoved. There is no driver in the trolley, and it's uncontrolled. It's just running down the track. In the track, there are 5 workers working, as you can see in this end. If you don't do anything, the trolley is going to go down and mow down all 5 of them. It's going to kill them all. Right? So you are standing at this location and you have a switch. So if you throw the switch, it's going to switch the track to this alternate path where there is just 1 worker working. Right? So it's going to kill that 1 worker instead of the 5 workers. Right? Then the question is posed as to, will you push the switch? Will you pull the lever to change the track, or you won't? Right? This question has been asked all over the world with educated people, uneducated people, people of different race, religion, nationality, condition, whether they are very God-fearing or not, and whatever, right? In general, it's been shown that more than 80% of the people always say they'll throw the switch. They'll redirect the trolley because everybody can see instead of 5, you're just losing 1 life, and that's a better choice. Then if you go on to the web and then read about this, you would find so many variations of this problem, right? So right here, there is one other variation where instead of you just throwing a lever, you are actually standing on top of a bridge, and then there is a person right next to you, right? So instead of throwing a switch, here the option is for you to push this guy, and he's going to fall down on the track, and then the trolley is going to hit and kill him. When you do that, the trolley is going to stop, right? So will you do that? Right? Most of the time, people say, no, I won't do that. And if you rationally look at it, you are killing 1 person to save 5. It's still the same thing, right? So why not? Ethicists and people who have looked into it deeply, they basically say in the first case, you are throwing an inanimate object from one position to another, and effectively you are saving life. Whereas in the other case, that person standing next to you is nowhere in the picture to begin with. And by you pushing that person onto the track, you are putting him into the picture and killing him, and that somehow is not to most people. The idea that it was originally proposed is to see, do we get our innate morality, ethics, things like that from religious teachings, or what our mom and dad taught us, or like what things we read in a book, or things like that, right? And it was universally seen that wherever you ask the question, it's more or less the same, people respond the same way. So it was shown that, no, there is an innate sense of virtue in human beings that just comes out, right? That was great, fantastic. But now, including Intel, we are all into autonomous driving, right? So this problem comes to reality now. So far, when you are driving a car, if there are, just to make a simple scenario, imagine there are 5 people standing there on the road, and then there is 1 person standing on the side, and if those people are not watching you, you may just end up mowing them all down. If that's the situation, maybe you can turn the wheel and go kill that one person and then save the 5 people. But whether you do it or not really depends on your reflex, what your thoughts are in case of adrenaline flowing, how do you react to that situation, things of that nature. But when it's an autonomous driving car, you can program all these things down to the last bit, right? And every time the situation is encountered, the car is consistently going to do the same thing, right? So now the question becomes, of course, the same problem can be changed in so many different ways. So if it's 5 people versus 1 people, well, it's so easy, right? So everybody agrees all over the world. Everybody says, yeah, you should kill one person, blah, blah, blah. So we can code that into your autonomous driving algorithm to take the same decision. Maybe world will even be a safer place or something. But what if these 5 people are on the middle of the road, whereas the other person is a pedestrian following the rules and staying there properly, right? So in that case, should the car take the diversion, go kill that person and not hit these 5 people? Then it gets more and more complicated. Now, move this all the way back. So forget 5 people, one person. There is just one pedestrian crossing the road without paying attention to the stoplight that's on. So he or she should not be crossing the road, but they are, right? So the autonomous driving car is coming in the last minute. So naturally, car has to brake. That's all well understood. But now imagine when the car really puts a hard brake, the person in the car is going to lose his teeth. Okay, is going to move forward, hit his face or something like that, right? So should the car do that or not? So now that becomes a more tricky question because you may think, yeah, you want to save a life versus just hitting your face, right? What's the big deal? But if you keep narrowing the gap down, right, and instead of killing the person, you're just going to hit the person and he's going to be okay, whereas you get a one teeth knocked out, right? So what would you do, kind of thing? Then these questions are now being debated, and there are questions being raised. Why should a software engineer in San Francisco decide what should happen in German, right? Because if the same algorithm is applied all over the place, how do you go about doing that? Now, at least if the answer, if the value as described in this problem is universal, it might become, you can come to some consensus and then you can code your algorithm in some way. But very interestingly, you can just go to moralmachine.mit.edu. So MIT has been doing a survey posing this problem in multiple different ways to see how people from different parts of the world respond to this, right? So you might have seen these kinds of graphs. These are called spiders. So there are 10 different parameters that are listed around the circle. And then we ask people from all over the world to see, how do you feel? What do you think we should do, right? So if you really look at this, the pink areas of the world, that's the Western world, and then the blue ones are Eastern, and the green ones are more like Latin America, the south part. Depending upon the individual social, cultural norms, for these kinds of scenarios, people give different kinds of answers. So now it's not like a simple few hundred people, what do they think kind of thing. Right now it's I think 2.3 million people have taken this survey. So we really have a good sense of how people think, what do they want to do, etc. So in the parts of the world where laws, rules and regulations are all well followed, etc., people are even okay with inaction. Whatever happens, or they want to, if it's versus some pets versus humans, they want to spare humans and things like that. But if you go to the parts of the world where higher societal values accorded to some people, right? Either they are famous, rich, or some they are uh, giving a lot of jobs to a lot of people, whatever. So you can see the green one kind of trending down here, that's indicating they want to spare the higher status. So if a person happens to be higher in the social status, they want to spare them. Whereas here it's going in the other direction, right? And sparing the young. So in the blue domain, people don't seem to care about if it's a child versus an adult. Whereas in the green part of the area, that is a big deal. So people are also ask, what's the point of all this? Because car is not going to know who's rich or higher status or something like that. But even for that simple question of if there is one pedestrian, would you brake really hard to save the pedestrian or knocking the teeth out of your passenger, or the other way about? Some companies, I believe it's Audi or Mercedes-Benz, somebody has said something like, we need to pay, our loyalty should be with our passengers, right? Because they paid money, bought our car, their safety is our number one concern. You may agree with it, not agree with it, but if they don't say that, and if they really go and even knock the teeth out of a person saving a pedestrian, the pedestrian may just walk away, right? So that nothing happened to the pedestrian. But the passenger is going to now sue the car company saying you brake too hard, you shouldn't have, or like maybe you stopped 10 feet before and you could have gone 1 feet, still not hurt the patient, saved my teeth also, something, right? So the ethics of what is right, what is not, has to be really evaluated and then entered into the algorithm of how things are going to work. Right? So keep this in your mind, then we'll come back to this at a later point. So if anybody has seen this picture before, you can say what it is, but this is called a Shirley card. So this card was originally designed, basically a color photograph, right, of a woman developed by Kodak. So in the 1950s, 60s, when they started developing color film and color printing technology, there was no easy way for Kodak to tell individual photo studio owner, whoever is the technician printing the images, to figure out what is the right way, what is the correct skin tone, how do you get the image right? So their solution to that was, this is actually a lady in Kodak apparently in those days. So they took a picture of this person with multiple colors and then they printed out this particular photograph and shipped it with their negatives. Right? So if you are running a local studio, when you print an image, then you will calibrate your printer to make sure the skin tone correctly matches this particular color, right? Which is great. It perfectly made sense at that point, but pretty soon people started realizing if it's a Caucasian white woman, everything works great, right? But if it's people of different skin tone, the prints are not coming out okay, right? And apparently for a long time, Kodak immediately didn't like jump and they couldn't figure out what to do. But actually advertising companies that were photographing chocolate, things like that, they were complaining saying, hey, if you use your color film, our chocolate doesn't look like how it's supposed to look, right? So of course, then they went and got multiracial models, put them together, took a picture and then sent that out in the 70s, right? So thing can be corrected, but once something like that gets done, for good or bad, that continues to perpetuate for a long time into the system, right? So even today, if people have to do digital video when they do screen test, things like that, the tones are still more appropriate for lighter skin condition tones, etc., rather than darker ones, right? So that was in the 60s. So I found this video clip on YouTube, which is just 10 years back, right? So this may not play well on the bridge. So, hey, Praveen.
Yeah, I put it in the chat window.
Okay, all right. So here I'll just play this. This is about 10 years back, right? Then this is facial recognition now. So if you are light-skinned, for example, Caucasian men, the recognition rate is really, really high, right? So it's some tests were done about using about 300, 400 photographs, about 98% of the time, 99% of the time, everything worked out okay. But if it's women, it actually starts to go down, right? It's about 7% error rate. So if it's brown or black skin tone men, it increases to about 12%. And if it's darker skin female, it's 35%. Even the gender is not correctly identified, right? So you may definitely see it's not just the Shirley card problem, right? Some of the problems perpetuate. So how do you continue? What do you do? So this is now. So the Amazon's recognition, that's a software that they sell for image recognition. Right? And this is one of their own slide to show that Werner Vogels, who's one of their that recognition software lead, 98% of the time, his image is always recognized correctly, right? So that's very good. But if you really do a much wider range of recognition, ACLU did some study to show that 28 US lawmakers were incorrectly identified as criminals in the image recognition process, right? When we talk about that, I mean, clearly, it's not Amazon's intention to recognize things incorrectly, or it's not the computer's intention to not recognize darker skin tones, anything like that. But you can, even now, if you go into the data sets to see what images are being used to train the algorithms, that's still about 80, 90% Caucasian men kind of thing, right? So there are, again, efforts to, MIT is doing one to bring a wide variety of images into the picture. And there are also options where if you're developing a new algorithm, you can send it to them and then they'll test it across a multitude of image models to see how well it does, things like that. But if you just go and take the most popular, famous image data set that's out there, there is one called, I think, Faces in the Wild, FIW, something like that. Those are all, I mean, it's just that when they collect a bunch of images from the web, it tends to skew one way. And so whatever you are using that to train, the algorithm gets trained that way. And so some of the biases continue to stay there, right? So we need to have a sense of why we need to really pay attention to make sure these things are getting sorted out. Again, we can say, hey, these are all some corner cases. You put a better set of models in there, issue is going to go away. So just like Kodak gave a multiracial model photo to address that issue, we can come up with a better that issue goes away. So what is the big deal, right? The issue is Moore's law. Basically, because of the speed with which things are growing and how fast things can move from one stage to the next, some errors that are in the system can very quickly really spread across the world and stay there for a long, long time. Right? And human beings are not really good at recognizing this exponential rise notion, because historically, as evolution continued for millions of years, we were not really required to recognize exponential rise, right? That wasn't needed. If you recognize linear increment, you are good. So many of you might have seen this spreadsheet I sent out, I think a few months back. This is about a story of a chess player who goes to a kingdom, wins everybody. The king asks, what do you want as your prize? And the guy says, well, I mean, I just play chess, and so just give me 1 grain of rice in the first square of my chessboard, then double it on the second square, double it on the third square, and continue doing that for all 64 squares, and that's good enough for me. So the king says, is that all you want? I mean, I can give you a lot more. No, but that's good enough, right? So king says, okay, take the whole bag. I don't care. You can have the whole bag. He says, no. Actually count and then like give me really what I'm asking for. So you can see, so this is on square 1, you have 1 grain of rice, right? And then square 2, you have 2, square 3, you have 4. By the time you go to square 64, you won't believe the amount of rice that you need is what would have been produced in the entire world for the past 264 years. If you really presume the 700 million tons of rice that was produced last year is produced every year before, right? We all know we didn't produce that much rice 100 years back, right? So it's pretty much all the rice produced ever in the world. Even if you put them all together, you won't even get to this point, right? The point of the story is we are really, really bad in understanding the notion of exponential rise. So I know the story. Even then, I have to double, triple check my numbers to make sure, is it really this high kind of thing, right? So if you go back to the slide and look at this, so this is a slide that I found from this particular site. Again, it may not play well on the Skype, but what we are trying to show is if you build a computer that has to have the capacity of what one human brain can do, I mean, that much of computation, right? The people have gone around, I mean, there are people like Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the well-known futurists. He has come up with some idea of how to compute, how much computing power you need. So he has come up with the number of 10 quadrillion, okay, computations per second. I mean, if you have that much of computing capacity, that's equivalent to one human brain, right? So right now there are a couple of supercomputers in the world which are beyond that, but it's just 1 or 2 supercomputers. It's not that easily available, right? But if you really look at this as to how this is progressing, they've made a nice comparison to the number of drops of water in Lake Michigan in volume. So if you map that to the computing power, right, how things are growing, you notice for a long time, 40s, 50s, 60s, you don't notice anything at all, even 80s, 90s. But from 2015 to 24, suddenly the whole lake fills up, right? So this is again to talk about how quickly the doubling of capacity can increase the total computing capacity that's available to us. So since we are really bad, we don't understand the effects of computing and how quickly things can go. So anything that you implement, anything that you do, it can quickly have like enormous consequences and it can grow extremely fast, right? So in the end, we are talking about so how programmers, developers, people in IT working on AI all need to develop a sense of this perception and understand how what we are doing could have enormous consequences. So this is along the same line. So if you look at the timeline, human beings are again pretty bad in projecting what may happen in future, because again we keep thinking in very linearly. So if I ask you what's going to happen in another 10, 20 years, you're just going to go look back 10, 20 years in the past and then project it the same way in the future, right? So there is a very interesting article that was listed in the previous thing. I can send you the list of links to you after the talk. There is an interesting way to make people understand. So if we somehow build a time machine and then go back 200 years, right, and then bring a person from there to today, right, he or she would probably die looking at the amount of differences between their world and our world, because 200 years back even cars didn't exist, right? Now we have smartphones with which we are walking around. You can read that article. It's like very, very nicely written. So the amount of change is phenomenal in about 200 years, right? So after seeing this world, let's say that person goes back to his own time, then he wants to impress somebody else the same way. And then if he uses the same time machine, goes back 200 more years, so maybe to 1600 and brings somebody to 1800, that person will say, okay, I mean, it looks interesting, but nothing like out of the world. Here, the 1600 person would be able to easily understand what's going on in 1800. Reasonable improvements, but nothing earth-shattering. So for that 1800 person to impress someone that well, he probably has to go 10,000 years back to bring someone, right? And again, if you go one more order, the 10,000 year person, if he goes back 10,000 years and brings someone, it won't be that impressive either. He might have to go 100,000 years back to bring someone. So the speed with which things are happening, it keeps getting narrower and narrower, right? So we tend to do this in this red line kind of notion, and even if you use present growth rate, it's going to be like this orange line kind of thing. But whereas because of Moore's law and things like that, things are going to really move up at an astronomical speed. So why does that affect ethics? That comes up because of AI, ML, and DL, right? So AI is, we know, artificial intelligence. ML is kind of a subset of that that relates to machine learning. And then within that, we know deep learning, where you really go in and understand the essence of something to put that to use and to predict what's going to happen next. So this diagram shows on the left side a simple neural network. So that the red dots are the input. When you give that input, there is a layer of this neural network that does the computation and gives you something on the output layer. So far, so good. We can figure out what's going on. We can go tweak things and so forth, right? But because of the enormous increase in computation, now we have a lot of deep learning neural networks that are coming into play. So when you give an input, it goes through multi-layers of computation that's all hidden from us. And then you get some sort of an output in the end. The output is often fantastic. That's great. But you no longer really understand how you got to that particular point, right? That becomes tricky. So if you look at this particular chart, this is for a simple thing as Expedia startup. You have an origin airport, a destination airport, a departure gate, airline, etc. With that input, it does some computation and then spits out a price for you, right? That's great. You got the price. But if the price is really off, you are no longer able to really figure out whether it's right or wrong. You are at a loss as to what's going on inside, right? So the effectiveness of deep learning itself is in several areas, it's really, really good. There are multiple stories. So if you look at this one, Syracuse, the city in the New York, state of New York, they had a water line problem, right? The water line, potable water line infrastructure was really, really old. So every year something or the other will just break up and then water will be spewing on the main street. And so the city mayor has to go fix it. And this was becoming a recurring problem and they had a hard time doing it. So the mayor tried asking the state government, city, etc., to get like huge amount of fund to replace all the water lines. Nobody is willing to give that much money. Number one, it's too expensive. Number two, it's not a big skyscraper where everybody can take a picture and cut ribbon or something. It's for replacing pipe underground, right? So there is not a lot of willingness to give money to such project. So after a lot of thought, work with the university, so they went around using DL to address this problem. The way they went about is from 2001, they collected every bit of data that was available in the city about various pipelines, how things were laid out, and which pipeline broke at what time and how long it cost to fix and so forth. It took a lot of time. It was all like some dog-eared, paper-written records, this and that has to be collated and put in some proper database that could be analyzed properly. Then now, let's say this is year 2019, so they took the last 20 years of record, right? But they gave just the first 15 years worth of record to the deep learning algorithm, saying, okay, go learn this and then tell us where the pipes are going to break in year 16. So DL made some prediction, but we already had the answer because we had 20 years worth of records, right? So the team went and corrected it, saying, hey, you are right here, but you are wrong there. That didn't break, but this one broke. You didn't talk about that, right? Once that input is given, then it went back and did that again for the 17th year. Again, there were some errors that were all corrected, 18th year, 19th year. So after 3-4 iterations, the algorithm was getting better and better and better. And then when the current year came in, then it was giving its prediction and it was like pretty much on the dot. And so the city could save a ton of money. And this whole project is now on GitHub. Any kind of city in the world can download and try to use that, right? It's a fantastic way to use DL, but the problem is now we don't really understand how it figured it out, exactly what characteristic, what is it that it figured to find that is the pipe that's going to break next, right? So University of Pittsburgh did another study where they wanted to save the hospital beds. So they collected data related to pneumonia patients. So they are coming in and whatever their conditions are, that's all fed into the system. And the system has to say, is that person going to get better or going to get worse? So if the prediction is better, you can just give some medication and send them home. You are saving a hospital bed. But if they are going to get worse, you're going to admit them and treat them properly, right? This was closely monitored by the physicians, of course. And pretty soon they found that in the case of people with asthma, when they come in, if they have pneumonia, it's a serious condition. So the hospital physicians always knew that they need to be immediately admitted. So they are sent to ICU, treated properly. They always got better. Then they are sent home, right? When this data was in there, that ICU part was not considered as getting admitted into the hospital because they are not physically in the hospital bed, but treated in the ICU. So the input output was the person with asthma, whatever, they came in with pneumonia and they got better and left. So it was starting to predict that they'll be better and so they need not be admitted into the hospital, right? Real physicians knew that this will be a disaster. If you just send them home, they're going to die, right? But since the system was fairly simple and they could immediately see what was going on, this was caught right away. And with that added ICU part added to the system, then it started predicting more correctly. But the question is, of course, if you don't do this, will it ever get corrected? yeah, it will get corrected because a lot of people will die, and then the algorithm will find its way to figure out, okay, these people are dying, something else is going on, and so it will eventually correlate asthma with pneumonia, and then they should not be released to go home, etc. Right? But a lot of people are going to die, so that's not a good outcome. So if the system is simple enough, this is like a smaller system, physicians watching, and you can find this, it's garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, and it can be fixed. But if it's not that, if it's a more complicated scenario where some outcome comes out, you no longer know what's going on, right? So there were even, I think about 7-8 years back, there was the flash crash in the Wall Street. There was algorithm-driven trading that was going on, and one day suddenly the whole this thing, the prices just went down. The Dow Jones took a huge dive. Till now, nobody really knows exactly why, what happened, kind of thing. And there are, of course, some generic sledgehammer protection, like if the average drops suddenly, whatever, 400 points, the trading will be stopped for half an hour, kind of thing. So some such thing came in, but nobody could really figure out, and eventually it corrected itself and it's running fine. But if you can quickly lose control and you may not know what's going on, right? But if that is the case, if you think you really want to, the ethics or the morally right thing to do is to let AI and DL do only things that you understand clearly, right? If you put such a strong limitation, you are not going to get the full benefit of the technology, right? So, for example, if you take, I'm sure you all read like the Google searches, simply depending upon which part of the country, people are starting to search more and more about sneezing or cold, fever, something. The algorithms were starting to predict where the next flu peak is going to be. And so that can potentially help administrators ship a lot of medication to that area. In fact, cut it out even before it peaks. You can provide the needed medication to that location, right? So if you, we don't know what are all the things it was actually using it to figure out. Is it just the search term trying to say who searched for sneezing more often in that area, or is it really temperature plus pollen plus how often people shake hands and blah, 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 and different kind of things, right? So there is a clear advantage to letting it run all the way because it can do something fantastically, but there is a clear disadvantage or danger to letting it do what it wants because you don't know what's going to come out, and if it's wrong, it could be severely wrong. Okay? So then comes the generative adversarial networks. That's a next big thing in AI right now. You might have heard about that. The idea is initially, let's say you have like images of cats and dogs, right? So you have these real images of cats and dogs. You put that into the discrimination network. That's a neural network. Initially, you say, okay, these 5,000 images are cats. These 5,000 images are dogs. Go learn, right? So the system learns to figure out somehow whatever the innate quality of the dog and the cat is. And so subsequently, then you throw the next image, it can tell you whether it's a cat or a dog, right? So that part we all understand. So that's been going on for quite a while. But now what we are doing is there is also a generative network. So this generative network is going to create or like going to try to create the images of cats and dogs, right? So it's going to create some image, send it in, and the discrimination network, which already knows how cats and dogs look, it's going to simply say, this is nonsense, right? So initially, the generative network is going to send some noise, some gray image or something, right? It's going to say, no, this is not a dog or a cat at all. Or you can even think in a simpler fashion that the discriminator is trained to just recognize cats, right? So from a bunch of images, so it knows really well. And then the generator just creates something and then sends it in, and it's going to say, crap, this is not a cat, right? But that is fed back to the generator network again, which then initially randomly it keeps creating a bunch of images that sends it and gets a value back saying this looks maybe 0% like cat or 1% like cat, etc. but the generated network is going to keep learning continuously. So pretty soon it's going to find something looks like 10% like a cat. So since there is AI on both sides, it can quickly start figuring out, aha, this is the quality that it's looking for, and keep enhancing that to a point where the discriminator network can no longer figure out whether it's a fake image created by the generator network or it's a real photograph that you took in the wild, right? The purpose of this, again, this can have some enormously positive consequences. Any of you can just download TensorFlow neural networks that are available for free from Google. So there are MRI images of cancerous tumors and clean brain images available for free on the net, right? So you can just train TensorFlow to look at a brain image and say whether it has a tumor or not, right? So once it's fully trained, then the adversarial network, the generative network, can just start feeding it images and to whether it's a real image or not. And pretty soon that we are able to now generate how the tumor is going to progress in 2 months, 4 months, 8 months down the line, right? And the discriminator network is able to say, yeah, given this is the condition of the tumor now, 2 months later, this is how it's expected to grow. So you're able to create such images using the generator network. So there are enormously positive things that you can do with this idea, but you can immediately think of a lot of negative things you can do with this, right? So you can create an image that is not true, but it's going to look really, really correct and appropriate for the general public. So you can create havoc with such an idea, right? So with these kind of thing, there is immediately a lot of privacy concerns come into play. So you might have heard about this Target story. It was really popular like 6-7 years back. What happened was Target was starting to track what each person buys in their store. So they apparently send some coupons for baby products to a young teenager, a girl, and the father of the teenager got really pissed off, saying, hey, how can you send some baby products coupon to my daughter and she's just a teenager? That's very inappropriate, right? The story says, oh, the Target immediately apologized, but later on the father came to know that the teenage daughter is indeed pregnant. Basically, it's supposed to be because she was starting to buy very like no odor flavored cotton swabs on like at some point in time, progressing on to some particular vitamin at some point, and so it could predict that means 2 months later she's going to deliver a baby, kind of thing, right? It was written in such a way that it really catches your attention. Wanted to understand if it's really, really true. If you really dig in, that's why I provided that second link. It seems to be sort of yes and no. So it sort of happened, but it's not like it happened the way it was described. But they were tracking. You can go and read more about it. But the point here is the algorithms can get pretty sophisticated to a point where compared to what immediate family members or we ourselves know about us, they can do a lot more prediction correctly, right? So there is these notions of these newer types of CAPTCHA. You may know about CAPTCHA, that's where you are asked to read some blurry image to figure out what it is. That was originally designed to prevent bots from creating like thousands of accounts where there is like a free email or some web account or something. So started going about that, right? So they immediately outsource it to some place where people actually work on it and then give you an answer to that and things like that. So then they came up with, instead of words, click on all the pictures that has a car or a shop front in it and things like that. But those things can quickly be overcome, right, with different kinds of things. So now Google itself provides a service. So if you start a company to sell flowers and then you have an account page and you want to make sure somebody is not creating 1 million accounts just for fun or to hack your site or something like that, Google provides a service. You just put their code in your web page. So when people come in and then whatever they do in that page, all that information is monitored, gathered, and then sent to Google. So the Google algorithm will then analyze if it's a person, if does it look like a person, because they'll come in and then the mouse may move a little bit here and there. They may click on something or spend n number of seconds looking at the page before they click on something. All those information is gathered and fed into the Google algorithm. Then it actually gives your website a credibility score of what probability is this really a person or it's a robot, right? And then if it's close to 1, it's a person, then maybe you let that person create an account. If not, you can deny. So of late, you might have started seeing things like instead of reading a blurry image, you just need to say, I am not a robot, and click on it and move on, right? So then that information goes to Google, and Google gives you the credibility score of whether that person is this or not. And there are a lot of new IoT devices coming in. So for example, Amazon is now creating a microwave that's connected to Alexa, right? These kinds of things. So maybe it's good, you can do voice control, but that can also provide information as to how many popcorns you eat in a week kind of thing. And we are not sure if that information will be sold to your healthcare company or not, right? With a lot of data gathering, particularly with this fake news, and the deep fake is the technology that allows you to take any person's face on image and then you can put it on some other person's face and also make them say whatever you want using the previous speeches that they might have given or the voice clippings that you may have, right? Initially, this may all look kind of like a fun, crazy thing to do. It may have some good, useful usage also. But you can imagine, I mean, forget US, if it's really spread around the world, in different parts of the world, people who are not well aware of these technologies can really be fooled to believe anything, right? So even if you simply take a video of a person saying XYZ, their own family member, and then send it to them, you can fool them, and it can really be taken into like extreme ends. Along those lines, China is actually implementing what's called a social credit system. Interested people can go read the long article in here. It basically says it's a very dystopian system, not a good idea sort of thing. But again, the original idea was something that they wanted. Unlike US, China didn't have kind of a credit score system like the FICO score that we are all used to. So people used to just get a loan and then just run away, right? And there was no easy way to track them and like make sure they pay the money they borrowed. So instead of just recreating the FICO score in that country, they actually went ahead with the social credit system. This has been implemented in multiple provinces in China, and the idea is to expand it to the whole country at this point. So everybody starts with a score of 1,000, and then for every good thing that you do, you keep getting some small plus points all the time. So the good thing could be something like buying diaper, because that means you have a baby and you are taking care of a baby, you get plus 10, right? And then you are donating money, you get plus 5, whatever. But if you do something really bad, you miss a mortgage payment, maybe you get minus 50, right? And if you really do something phenomenally bad where you took a loan and you did not repay it at all, it can really become like minus 400, right? So your score becomes 600 or something like that. And when you get to that, in US, since it's FICO score, the usual negative consequence that we face is maybe getting a loan becomes difficult, or maybe you pay more interest for the loan that you get, and so forth. Whereas in that system, you are really banned from doing a lot of things that are available only to people with good scores. So for example, you can no longer fly. So if you try to book a plane ticket, you are immediately banned saying your score is too low, right? then if you are trying to book high-speed trains, you are not allowed to do that. Those are all considered like reserved only for people with higher scores, right? And if your score is really bad, there are even things like when somebody calls you, instead of getting a ring back, they'll also get first a message saying this person is not trustworthy. So be careful, kind of thing, right? The thing is, if you really dig through, you can find cases where it's not really that person's fault. He or she wasn't really cheat the system. I read articles on a person who was doing some huge, nice business related to coal. They had borrowed a bunch of money, but there was no the LLC, limited liability corporation, kind of separation from the company and the person. And when the government changed rules favoring more green technology, suddenly the coal industry, the coal business went down, right? So now he's not able to pay the money back, but his score became 400, right? So there was no easy recourse, and he still has to like get back on. So there are a lot of like pluses and minus in such system. So the idea, all this becomes more and more important because the speed of change, right? How quickly things can change becomes very serious and severe in these cases. So previously we had things like, okay, printing press came in, or like textile mills came in, and it took away a lot of jobs from laborers, kind of thing. But when horse and buggies went away, maybe there are new oil drilling or gas pumping jobs or something like that, right? And a lot of new technology, something like radio and television, when it came in, it didn't really take away a lot of job. It added, it added new features and more opportunities for people to do, right? But the next round of changes could be really swift because of the exponential rise changes that we were talking about, right? And it can really come and take away even jobs related to very creative and hard to comprehend skills. So there are right now programs, software that can write sports report, right? So Ironpic's game takes place. Just whatever the end score is available in some database, and you can trigger a program that will go and pick up things like what was the weather condition in Allentown on this Friday evening. So it can write a nice report like, oh, it was a pleasant 72-degree evening in Allentown. There were 10,000 people gathered in the Ironpick Stadium, things like that. It can really write things of that nature. And then the things like radiologists, etc., they are all considered very high-paying jobs with enormous skills that are hard to replicate. That's why I was talking about the GAN, generative adversarial networks, right? So it can really move in, and with a phone app, you can quickly figure out whether it's a real tumor or not. You don't really need to wait for a radiologist to review and then tell you whether it's true or not. So the general thing is it's moving in this fashion, right? The first one is ANI, which is artificial narrow intelligence. That's what Siri is, or any Alexa, any of these things that we use currently. Basically, there is a narrow domain in which it functions really well, right? The next stage is the artificial general intelligence, where the system can do whatever a human being can actually do. But the thing is that beyond that, it's going to be artificial super intelligence. That people think that that's really coming because this Kurzweil, Ray Kurzweil, is a well-known futurist. He works for Google right now. So he's saying the Moore's law is like just beginning, right? So we are in this curve, and it's really growing fast. And as we said, somewhere here, the 10 power 16 is when one human brain can be mimicked, right? So they think we'll easily reach that state in 2023 when that kind of computation power would be available for about $1,000, right? So each one of these dots indicate what you can get for $1,000 worth of money, right? So for $1,000, you could have got UNIVAC, Apple II, Mac, all that in the 90s. But in 2001, you get like one insect brain worth of computing for $1,000. Now mouse brain, now human brain is kind of around the corner, and they think pretty soon all human brains, whatever they can do, that may be available by 2050 kind of time frame. And beyond that point, how things will move is really hard for us to predict, because the understanding is what people say there will be something called a technological singularity, right? You can read about that on the web. That would be something like a Big Bang moment, after which the normal rules and laws and ethics and ideas with which we live, run our world, may no longer apply. It will be a different kind of world, right? And it can, a lot of people think it will happen within this century, in the next 10, 20 years kind of thing, right? So why is this important? Because we have to be aware of it, and we don't really think in terms of these exponential rises. And so there are groups, people, there is, for example, a website called Less Wrong. You can go check it out. They are running conferences, and they're writing proposals, papers to see how to guide the development of AI, DL, everything in an ethical way. Eventually, when it really takes off, it won't really hurt and be kind of kinder to the human beings, right? And even if you think this is all sci-fi, that's never going to happen in our life, right? But you can see if anything that happens. So even if you think of autonomous driving, which I would love, because I really think it's going to eventually cut down the accident rates by 95% or something, right? So it's going to be fantastic. But when it comes in, people usually think only in terms of maybe all the taxi driver jobs will be gone kind of thing. But if you really think through, there are second and third order jobs that will be eliminated just by autonomous driving alone. So for example, if you think of all the motels and gas stations that are out there, they don't make a lot of money just selling gas. They sell they make money by selling coffee and donuts and chips to the people who come in, right? And if cars are self-driving, they know exactly where, when to stop, what to charge, and keep moving. And so the incidental purchases of a driver just walking in and buying chips, that will all be eliminated, right? So maybe a lot of those stores will just have to go away. And similarly, if it's all electric cars, and why would you need all the mechanic shops that are out there? Why would you need the motels that are out there? Because the car can keep driving, and you can just sleep in the car and then reach your destination. You no longer need motels, right? So there'll be second, third order jobs that will all just start to vanish, right? And including people in the technology world, they would really think we are bringing enormous value to this world, right? So we are eliminating 95% of the accidents, and we are saving so much of money, etc. And so we should get all the money benefit from that. We deserve it. In some sense, that's true. But if you're going to eliminate all the jobs that are in the world, this is actually a real picture, not a photoshopped image from Sao Paulo, Brazil. So you can see a cordoned off, a gated community here, and the rich people living here, and then the shanty town right next to it, right? So this is going to continue sort of becoming more and more the norm. Again, this doesn't mean that we need to move away from tech or anything. It's not possible. That's not right either, because as we said, even in autonomous driving, it's going to save a lot of lives. So, but just like in bioethics, for example, now there is a worldwide discussion and understanding that you shouldn't edit human genes, right? So there's a moratorium. So we need to have robust conversation, then figure out what is right and what is wrong. Right? When we say that, even when we see these kinds of pictures, we usually think, that's the 1%er, right? Whoever is some billionaires that are living there, and it's not us. So I was just reading this article. If you get a chance, please do go read it. That's talking about the 9.9 percenters, which will be all of us, right? And anybody who has a job in the IT industry, anything like that. The point, this is just the US scenario. What this is trying to show is from the 1930s to 2010 in the time frame, you can see the bottom 90% is the black line that's like this. So they owned about around 20%, close to maybe 30-35%, then now again only 20% of the wealth. And this gray line indicates the top 0.1%, not 1%, 0.1%, right? So their wealth has come down and then now it's picking up, it's going up. So these two seems to have swapped some wealth here and there, and then the 0.1% just going up. But if you look at the 9.9 percenters, they usually hold about 60% of the wealth, right? The thing is, if this really gets all skewed out, so we all belong to this category, right? So at least, so we need to be cognizant. We want people to have like a decent quality of life and jobs that are available that they can work on, etc. If it gets way too skewed, in the end, that's not going to work out well for anyone. When such discussions come up, I always see things like this basic income guarantee where everybody gets some amount of money, whether they work or not, given to them, that kind of thing. All that may be good, but if you really push it, it may leave people with dissatisfied life, right? They're not going to be really happy. So this brings us to another, just a funny, small. So Praveen, if you're on, you can post that second clip. This clip is in a long one. You don't need to watch the whole thing. Just watch like the first 1 minute. This is from the Disney movie WALL-E, right? This imagines the world where people are just sitting, they are fed, there are robots to take care of them all around. That's it. So basically, everything, all the food, shelter, clothing may be given to people, but that doesn't make their lives happy, right? So what are the solutions? What things can be done? So what do we need to do? So from individual professionals' point of view, there are things like ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery that we talked about. They have put together ethics.acm.org site that actually has a document that is listing how we should proceed, what we should do, what we should not do, and if you're coding something, developing a technology, what things to take into consideration, right? So compared to what they had in the, say, 80s and 90s, they've considerably updated and put out a new document. So originally things like when you write code, that should actually do what it's supposed to do. That was the ethics maybe 30 years back. Now you're also should ask, what is it going to be used for? Is it for the general good? Is it going to be helpful to the society, sort of thing, right? So that's just one example. And there are this other site, conversation.com. If you really go into it, that's talking about, I mean, take anything. I mean, there were like 2D recognition, some image recognition kind of thing that was done. a long time back. At that time, you just need to make sure when you say it's recognizing some image, it's recognizing an image, and that's it. Whereas now, your developers are encouraged to ask, what is it going to be used for? I mean, is it being done the right way, right? So at least develop some awareness. And then at the society level, we need conversation. So don't think somebody else is going to do it, right? So initiate and then participate among your friends, family, co-workers. You don't need to fight. You don't need to be stubborn, but at least understand different points of view, what's going on. Then volunteer, interact with different segments of the society, right? We often tend to be in our own bubbles. Most of our friends look like us. They do similar work. They earn similar money. And so we don't really have a good idea of what else is going on in other segments of the society. So reading some number in some abstract way, that's not really going to drive the point home. Human brain can perceive something much better if there is a story behind it. If you know a person really going through it, that will have much more impact on your story, on how you think, what you do, etc. compared to, yeah, I mean, there is some statistics saying 10,000 people have job or don't have job or something, right? And then this was just a interesting thing. In Netflix, I saw a show called Black Mirror. You may know about it. It's, of course, portrays a sort of a dystopian future. It's actually set on just maybe 10, 15 years ahead of where we are today, and then trying to come up with storylines as to what may happen, may not happen if it goes that way, right? So it's just an interesting way. So even things like the social credit system, there was an episode that really, yeah, talked about that, and so that was a good prediction. It came like a couple of years back, I think, and that just about the same time this China social credit system started getting implemented also, right? And also support any reasonable regulation. So things like there is a, for example, right to know movement. So the right to know movement says that if there is a new image recognition software that's coming up, people have a right to know what data set did we use to train the algorithm, right? So similarly, any new idea that's coming in, what is the intention? How can it be used? Or like, what is the protection mechanism that's put around it so that it cannot be misused? Things like that. One thing is, if we are not really sure how things are going to be used, there is also a concern that different entities, be it a society or anything, they'll come up with some sort of a vague ethics notion or some document and then say, oh yeah, we have that, and then but not really follow it on a daily basis on the plans and implementations and so forth, right? So there need to be a clear, conscious effort to understand the ethics, understand what needs to be done, then convert it into clear rules that companies and programmers and the society can follow also. So, for example, going back to the original story, if you just say autonomous driving companies do whatever they think is right, right? So Google may do something, Mercedes-Benz may do something, and Tesla may do something else that may not coincide and be consistent. So if there is a societal development and then there is a overall rule that's put out, whatever it may be, in a simple case, always say, kill the least number of people, right? So maybe that's a starting point, right? So it needs to be agreed upon and developed that way. That's why I thought this Janus forms a good metaphor, because we need to look forward and backward, because if you look at how things were moving and then how it's going to progress in future, we need to understand how things came to this current position, but that's still not enough. You really need to understand how quickly it can develop, right? So the future will be very different from history. You need to be prepared for that. And then you can think of ethics and then appropriate regulation. I mean, even companies like Microsoft, etc., do say we do need some reasonable guidance, societal, governmental systems, regulation. So, for example, EU, for the whole EU region, has actually put out a website listing what kind of AI technology guidance is acceptable in the domain. So we should think about, talk about, support what is reasonable, right? So at least we should get the conversation going. That was my last slide.